NFL season is just around the corner, and that means fantasy football is quickly approaching. You probably have some redrafts coming up in the next few weeks. Maybe you need some information on your IDPs. Well, Johnny and I are going to get into a mock draft here today, and we're going to go in live and make our picks. You're going to get some insight as to what we're thinking as we're drafting in our IDP league. So hold tight. In just a sec, we're going to jump right into that. As I mentioned off the top, we are back for another week of the IDP Plus podcast. I'm your host, Axton Harding, and co-hosting me, as always, when we get on screen together is Johnny freaking F1. Johnny Christophe, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. Ready to get into this 10-man IDP draft. We got a pretty deep one here. I'll give all my viewers and listeners a heads up. I'm just kind of focused on the tackles out here. I saw some great value for the defensive line late. Scoop the linebackers early, and then let the draft talk to you. So let's get this money. What do you say, Ax?
Absolutely. Yeah, for those that don't know, we the tackle-based scoring, we're kind of approaching it with the scoring settings that you would find for the Kings Classic. So it's just like linebackers kind of rule all, not necessarily that. I mean, they're just more heavily favored. So you're going to see a lot more linebackers up at the top, kind of finishers there among those top-end edge rushers and defensive linemen as well. So just kind of some context as we go into this. Johnny's picking from the 5 spot. I chose the 9 spot around the turn. So, Johnny, why don't you go ahead and kick this thing off, and let's get to drafting. Travis Hunter 101. We've seen a lot of that. It's rightfully so. You're playing a wide receiver, a defensive back slot. You're getting receptions and touchdowns for a DB. It's a no-brainer, in my opinion. So I'll let you get into your pick here at 105 after Zaire, Roquan, and Micah Parsons go off.
Yeah, so, Zaire and Roquan were the two I'm eyeing up there for linebackers. Fred Warner's a fine choice here. You got TJ Watt, love him, of course, hometown Pittsburgh guy, but I think his snaps are actually going to be a little bit reduced this year. I love the defensive flexibility, and that might be enough to push him over the edge right here. When we look at defensive line, TJ Watt, of course, is the top. Max Crosby, Aiden Hutchinson. I like all three of these guys. I think Hutchinson maybe kind of performs the same as he did last year. Tough to repeat that, at least on that trajectory, and we know he missed some games, but I'll tell you what, I'm coming out of here with with the defensive lineman, and I think Max Crosby is going to rebound, so I'm going him over TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, Hutchinson here. So that's who I'm going with, Axe, out of the big dogs, out of the first defensive lineman. Besides, I guess you could say Micah Parsons. So interested to see what you do here.
Sure, yeah. You took Max Crosby, a high motor guy, tons of snaps, tons of production, high tackle floor, big sack upside. Love that play. Then you see another linebacker in Fred Warner. TJ Watt goes off. I was kind of hoping maybe he might slip. I love that upside, but unfortunately he didn't follow me here. Aiden Hutchinson is another high upside guy. He's one I've kind of been fading a little bit at the start of these drafts just because of the slow start that we can kind of expect coming off of a gruesome injury like he did. But I expect he's going to have kind of all the same production once he gets in the middle of kind of the thick of it. Now, when I'm talking about guys that right now, I'm probably going to go get the last of this top tier defensive line group and grab me a Myles Garrett. I like Myles Garrett's upside. He's one of these guys that can finish in the top 5 easily overall finishers any given year. He's just a little bit more boom bust than what I typically like to go for. But for the top tier edge rushers, kind of at this point, I feel like Myles Garrett was a pretty good value in the back of the first. Now my mindset's probably is going to shift more towards the kind of the favored position in this format, which is the linebackers. And if we kind of filter here, looking at Zach Bond as the top linebacker in ADP, I'm not particularly too keen on that at this point. And frankly, all of my guys in the first round are going off the board. I might go back to a defensive line. I'm really eyeing Zach Bond here, though. You know what? I'm going to go around and I'm going to pick 2 edge rushers. I know it's a linebacker heavy kind of draft, but I'm going to go with Nick Bosa because I think he also has the kind of upside much like Myles Garrett, where he can easily finish in the top 5 as well in overall defensive lineman. We've seen him kind of dip in production the last year or two, but I think this year we're going to be looking at a lot of defensive snaps with this San Francisco defense, considering the state of the offense. So I think Nick Bosa is in for a bounce back year.
And I'll tell you what, Axe, that was going to be my pick. I had him queued up. I knew he wasn't going to make it to me. That's what, 4 picks away. So tough luck there. Next best lineman I'm looking at here is Nick Benito. Jared Verse actually is probably the guy who I would take. I'm a big proponent of Jared Verse, and I know second round is pretty heavy. Is probably a guy who you can pick right now, and it's not a problem. But I'm going to say, since he's at 26, I'm going to see if he wraps around and just take the chance here. But I got no problem taking him in this spot. I'm just going to go with a bounce back with Foye Oluokun is who I'm going to go with here. And it's kind of a risk, nothing's guaranteed. But I do think that he is the anchor of their defense. A little bit of questions there for Lloyd and Ventrell Miller. Interested to see what they do, kind of fading that. But let's see if my boy comes back to me, and he does, right? So you play the game sometimes, and it wins. Probably if you're in a bunch of, if you're in an IDP league with draft sharks out there, people who know the game, Jared Verse probably wasn't going to make it. Would have taken him over Will Anderson, would have taken him over Carter. Bates and Cross, too early to take defensive backs here. Ernest Jones, I respect it. And Caden Ellis was another guy who, if not Foye, I was thinking of. For Caden Ellis, I love him, but at the same time, I think it's going to be tough to repeat the year he had last year. It just all seemed to click. The sacks, the tackles, career high with the tackles. I'm not sure if it was career high with the sacks too, but nonetheless, how can it go any higher than this for Caden Ellis? So I'm going to say some maybe negative regression, honestly, and maybe in the slightest touch. But Caden Ellis, as much as he's hyped up now to that top 5, top 6 role, I can't really go with that. So I would have taken Jared Verse before him, but here we go. We took Jared Verse, and now it's back to you, Axe.
At this point, everybody just kind of assume wherever there's a defensive back, go ahead and slide defensive linemen and linebackers up a little bit. Unless we're talking Derwin James, Brian Branches, Kyle Hamilton's, then they can kind of maybe more hold their spot in these drafts. But, I've actually seen the guy that I'm looking at right now, since I've gone defensive line and I don't have that linebacker eligibility for guys like Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett. I'm looking at linebacker here, especially in a linebacker favorable format. And a guy in particular I'm looking at, I would be eyeing Terrell Bernard and Jordan Brooks here, just two guys who I think who have probably one of the higher tackle upsides, the guys that are left on the board. Jordan Brooks, a guy who has had no less than 143 tackles or 140 tackles in the last 4 years, except for 2023. I'm going to go ahead and select him right now. Last year, it was a little bit of a down, or a couple of years ago, he had a little bit of a dip at 111 tackles, but nonetheless, even in a linebacker 2 role, he was able to amass over 180 tackles. I've just been big on Jordan Brooks so far this offseason, and to get him in the 3rd round here behind the linebacker like 10 or 12, I think he easily finishes as a linebacker 1 this year in the top 12. So I just like that role hasn't changed. Everything is pretty well the same and kosher in Miami. And I imagine with a weakened defensive line, he ought to get even more looks there in the middle of the field. Now I'm probably still looking at, I told you guys I was eyeing a guy like Terrell Bernard. And I'm probably going to go ahead and pull the trigger on that, because Terrell Bernard, in my opinion, is another guy who could very well finish in the top 12 as an LB1 this season. Just looking at him historically, he's amassed 140 plus tackles. And last year, he was well on pace to even achieve the same mark before he went down due to injury. It's clear that this team is locked in on him as the green dot linebacker. He's going to be on the field for tons of snaps, and a rotational defensive line just kind of plays into a little bit more of a linebacker-friendly kind of approach to production. When you have a lot of guys rotating on defensive line, there's a little bit more holes that kind of open up just because of the kind of fluctuation in personnel. So that's my pick there with Terrell Bernard. I know I took half your clock, my man. You can.
That's all right. I'm good. I'll get it back. So, Axton, I really liked your Jordan Brooks pick. He was going to be my pick there too. I was hoping he fell. I knew that was crazy because we both like him, but I would have taken him before Bernard, just as you did. So I like both of those picks. We get a little surprise here. Probably not happening in most of your IDP drafts, but it is on this sleeper mock draft. That's Cam Bynum going in the 4th round. Makes my life a little bit easier. Now, with this pick, I'm going to take Edgerrin Cooper. But and I can say this because Axton is not coming up the pick. I get the next pick too. But really, I'm not taking Edgerrin Cooper over Alex Singleton at this point. I can't state how underrated he's going. I'm getting him right here in the 5th round, and to me that's ridiculous. I think a lot of people expect Zaire Franklin to once again pace the league in tackles, and that's fine and dandy. If you're going to put money on it, that's probably who it's going to be. But at the same time, Alex Singleton, I know he's coming off that ACL, but the 3 games he played, averaging over 10 tackles a game. So I absolutely love him this year. I don't think the injury so far to I believe his thumb is going to be anything to, hurt his stock. I think people may be looking into that, combined with the ACL, and justify this position. But to me, it's absurd. If I'm in a redraft, especially tackle heavy league, I'm taking Alex Singleton before Edgerrin Cooper. I know the breakout we're expecting here, but Cooper's still kind of a wild card. Is he going to get the snaps? Is he going to, continue to get the quarterback, make sacks, and play that high volume tackle role? So still love him, still on my team. Nonetheless, if I could swap these and I knew who I was drafting with, I know other people I play with are high on Singleton, and to me, big statement here is Singleton over Cooper still.
Sure. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, I like that Singleton has the high end upside. You're probably getting him as low end LB2 here. So a guy who could still, even with a slow start to the season, pretty easily get 140 plus tackles. That's pretty good value on a guy like Alex Singleton. Then Edge Cooper's a big guy that I like to kind of take over the green dot role in that primary inside linebacker role there in Green Bay over Quay Walker, who's kind of on thin ice as it is. So should he falter, I think Edge Cooper slides right in. I think even Isaiah McDuffie makes a nice linebacker too, and I think they even know it. He comes in and puts up every time he gets the opportunity. Now, since I start out defensive line heavy, I'm probably still going to keep going to linebacker here and then kick back to the defensive line because I like the middling linebackers or the middling defensive lineman. I'm going Logan Wilson with this pick. I think he's an underrated linebacker in this season. I've been picking him up all offseason in the 5th round as like a LB3 type. I get him as my LB3 here. This is even with defensive backs. This has been something I've been able to do pretty regularly is get Logan Wilson in the 5th round. He just keeps slipping, in my opinion. He's a guy who's coming off an injury, yes, but he cut a season short willingly because it was just the season was pretty well done. They knew where they had a long shot at the playoffs. Their defense was it was like Swiss cheese, man. And so Logan Wilson was already on pace for 160 plus tackles before he went down. With a full season, I think he was going to reach career highs in that department. And he's a guy who also rushes the passer as well. So he has that sack upside. So I love Trey Hendrickson in the 5th round of your IDP draft. So now that we're getting into the next pick, I'll talk a little bit about who I'm going to go with here. And I'll probably go with my guy, Jonathan Cooper, as my DL3. In the 6th round, Jonathan Cooper, another underrated guy who I feel like could very well finish as a high-end DL2, maybe back-end DL1 type. Just kind of depends on how things go this year. He may not quite have the upside of guys like that, but I feel pretty comfortable with him as a high-end defensive lineman too, with the kind of upside we've seen him put on the board in the last couple of seasons straight. So my kind of rationale there behind those two.
Tell you what, I love Jonathan Cooper as a defensive lineman because we're gauging the tackles here, and he gets a nice handful of sacks. So pretty safe player there at the defensive line, pretty good value at the 6th round. And I love that Logan Wilson pick, man. I keep bragging all off season. Logan Wilson, the 11 games, yes, he did miss 6, but the 11 games that Logan Wilson played and started in, he had no games with 8 or less than 8 tackles. So at least 8 or more tackles in all 11 of those games. I expect him to be an absolute dynamo. I got auto drafted on that. That was who I was taking anyway. Good thing I had him on the queue. Axton, I know you're a big proponent of Harold Landry, and I am too. So consistency, I'm a little bit worried about him going to New England, honestly. I auto draft there. I guess I'm on auto draft. I'll have to fix that. But Carson Swessinger ended up being my 2nd pick. I think he's dynamite here, back end LB1. So Harold Landry and Swessinger, happy with these two, and good thing I set my queue here.
Harold Landry is a guy he follows Mike Vrabel over to New England. I think Mike Vrabel is going to be very familiar. He was seeing 60-70% of snaps in Tennessee. I think we can expect a lot of the same in New England, but also with different defensive coordinator, maybe we see a little bit different usage. Historically, he is more of kind of your run stuffing kind of defensive lineman who's going to collect more tackles than have that pass rush upside, where he plays a lot more snaps in rush defense. But uh, nonetheless, he's definitely a guy who's going to get you 80 plus tackles every year and be kind of a solid, high floor kind of player for you. I think unfortunately he's just one of those players with a little bit of a capped upside, but who knows? With a different team, different personnel, different coaching, maybe he does get after the passer a little bit more and they get him on some more pass rush snaps, because I do expect some more consistency in the New England Patriots defense with the coaching personnel changes. So maybe we do see him rush the passer a little bit more, since they kind of need the help there. But I'll kind of switch quickly over into my pick. Carson Swessinger, also another guy with huge opportunity, a young guy there, to kind of get in the 7th round is outstanding. Now shifting into my pick here at the end of the 7th round, I picked Levante David, a very high upside pass rushing linebacker who can get you 120, 130 plus tackles in a season, and then also turn around and get you 5 sacks. And father time is no threat to a guy like Levante David until he calls it quits and hangs up the cleats. So in my opinion, I'm going to ride him till the wheels fall off. And here, I'm going to get another linebacker, probably going to be a little late. Yeah, I didn't quite get it. So I'm taking Jaquan Brisker in this one, unfortunately. Call it an auto mistake, but Jaquan Brisker is a nice defensive back at this point. I think he gets a little bit more consistency as well in the Chicago Bears defense. I talked about that in my Bears preview episode a couple of weeks back, so check that out. He's actually a guy I wouldn't mind at this point for a defensive back. So Johnny, we'll kick it over into your next pick here in the 8th round.
I still like Brisker, man. I like Brisker a lot. If he can, stay healthy this year, he's a banger back there. Gets at the quarterback too, so great player. If he gets hurt, Kevin Byard wheels up. We know that. I got sniped here. Tyler Nubin was the guy I was coming to get. To me, he's a top 5 defensive back for this year. Looking this beginning of the season, so a little bit bummed about that, but it happens. Maybe if I wanted him that bad, I should have taken the pick before, but still would justify Swessinger over Nubin. But Nubin definitely, to me, is one of the first, defensive backs you went off the board. For me, though, I'm going to go with Byron Young at the defensive line position. To me, these Rams outside backers and the defensive linemen in general, Kobe Turner's another guy who I'm going to be looking for later, but they both play, with a smart, on a smart team, smart defense, but also their box scores. They're consistently getting tackles. So Byron Young, not expecting him to have over 10 sacks. I'm sure he'll get a handful, but that's all we need here. Combine it with his tackle floor, and life's all good. Now, due to the fact that I really don't want to take many bench spots when I'm trying to be faithful to my true unit, my starting unit here, I'm probably going to look at defensive back for this pick. And at this point, there is kind of a sleeper out there. I know if I didn't get him right here, Axton will get him probably with his next pick. And that is Jalen Carley. He's going to project, as we know it right now, to be the starting second inside backer there behind Zaire Franklin, next to Zaire, I should say. So Carley's maybe a little cheat code here. Maybe you're looking at 120 or more tackles. Axton, I see you got auto drafted, huh?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. I love that pick with Jalen Carley's. The second inside linebacker there for Indianapolis has historically been a pretty good, lucrative one. We do have some coaching personnel changes, so we'll see how it shakes out. But if you can get a defensive back, a linebacker basically, in your defensive back slot, again, that's another kind of cheat code in my opinion. So I think you got a steal here in the 9th. Go ahead and chat about your pick, and I'll go back and say who I would have picked instead on mine.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I was trying to be faithful for the last pick, but I just got to give this guy some face time. I think at this point, we've got the last linebackers are EJ Speed. No way he's going over this guy, or should be. Nolan Smith. I get it, if you're going to play him at defensive line. Anzalone and Tyrese Knight. I love him too. He's a sleeper of mine, but I think Jack Sanborn, man, is really the guy that you should be poaching here. Even if he is a bench player, I'm cool with that. So to me, Jack Sanborn, we have to get him on the map, get him some airtime here, and pay our respects. He's going to have 8 tackles a game. I can see it, whether he's the starting Mike or the Will backer there. So I love Jack Sanborn coming into this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jack Sanborn, high-end linebacker. We've seen when he gets the opportunity, he's a guy who puts points on the board for IDP. He's had very high upside so far. Why in
How
the
about
world
you,
is this?
Axton? How about a couple guys you wanted to take there?
Yeah, so instead of taking Nick Amenwari, who's a great defensive back prospect, at this point in our drafts, typically in the ninth or 10th round, I've usually probably grabbed a defensive back. Instead of Brisker, my taste probably would have been something more like Kevin Byard from the same team, actually. Both these guys I feel like can be productive in the Chicago defense. But Kevin Byard just has been a guy who's had year-over-year production, a guy who's had a super incredible high floor of tackles, who's no stranger to 100 tackle seasons as a defensive back, and that value, in my opinion, especially at this point in the draft, I think he's a guy who ends up finishing consistently high enough that he should be going well before the 10th round, the way that I see it. But he consistently falls to me. He consistently puts up tackles, even plays in the box a little bit, and gets some sacks here and there. And he's always in on pass deflections as well. So Kevin Byard is the staple of consistency for kind of a late round defensive back if you want to shore up that position on your team. At this point, at ninth and 10th I probably would still wait to even fill out my defensive backs until the last handful of rounds, and then I hammer it and give myself some depth at that point, because I'm often probably going to be checking the waiver wires for guys who are popping anyways, and chances are I'm not going to waste a whole lot of roster space for defensive backs when I have more prominent options on the board at defensive line and linebacker. So at 9 and 10, I'd probably go more like, since I had already filled out an IDP flex with Levante David, I'd probably go add some more depth at linebacker. At this point, a Tyrell Dodson would be a good pick. Probably not specifically for my team, with having a guy like Jordan Brooks already on the team. Wouldn't really want to double up there. But man, I really wish I had kind of a list here of guys. Um, let's see. But at this point, I definitely add a few more linebackers and then short comeback. And I saw Zach Allen was available in defensive line. He's a top 5 interior defensive lineman. I've already got a Denver Bronco on my team, but he's another guy that's a good value at that point in the draft. And then there's more guys even down lower in the defensive line, probably even too early for this. Some guys like some aging veterans and like Hassan Reddick. I posted on Twitter the other day, a guy who's going to get some full-time opportunity, who's had 12, 15 plus sack upside, and he's basically left dead in the water in drafts this year because of contract woes and a fall off maybe last year. I think maybe that's more pertaining to the contract disputes and unhappiness he had there in the former team anyways. So in my opinion, I think this is a new life, new motivation, new money, new regime, new everything. So to me, a guy like Hassan Reddick later in drafts would be a good value. And that's just kind of going more off the top of my head, not really having the kind of list to kind of scroll through here.
I'll
But
tell you
just
what, I pull up
probably
my sleepers list. So I got a list here. So this isn't from exactly the top. I give you credit. So if you're in deeper leagues out there, maybe some guys you're hunting. If you're in deeper, IDP leagues in this defensive back, I'm looking at guys like Heike Smith, Jalen Hicks, Ifeatu Melifonwu, of course Jalen Carley's. I drafted him in the second to the last round, and Damani Richardson from Carolina are some guys that I'm really watching in this offseason. Maybe not week 1 stars, but maybe week 2 starters. Playing that full-time role. It might take a week or two, but these are guys who I find a lot of potential in at linebacker. Nate Landman wearing the green dot right now for the Rams. Servassier Dennis probably for a deep league, but I still think he has a potential to hit 100 tackles if he can stay healthy. Demetrius Knight out of Cincinnati, I love him taking that Jermaine Pratt role. Will he be a top 15 linebacker like Pratt? I'm not saying that, but I do think he'll be a solid LB3 from the jump. Cody Simon and Akeem Davis Gaither, interested to see what goes on between those two. I know that right now Mac Wilson is projected to be the green dot starter at middle linebacker, but I don't really see this having traction. I don't think it's going to stay week 3, let alone week 17. So something's in the water there. I think right now it's a hold position, but Simon and Davis Gaither, to me, give the highest upside. So we'll see what the snaps are. And finally, for defensive linemen, Derek Brown, I think he probably should have went somewhere at this draft. I think he's a very slept-on player. Malcolm Kuntz is a deeper guy, even deeper than Derek Brown. But Kuntz is a guy who had a solid year 2 years ago. Now he's healthy, back off injury, and really some scary, 1-2 punch there with Crosby and Kuntz. Also, Jeffrey Simmons. Axton, I know you're a big fan of Jeffrey Simmons. Heard you talk about him before. Like Jeffrey Simmons as well. Bradley Chubb, Leonard Williams, Keon White. These are some guys who you can get way later in drafts who I think might help your odds. So if you're in deeper leagues, those are some honorable mentions for you. Alex, you want to sign us off, baby?
Hey, let me hear your thoughts on the Sweat brothers. I think they're both incredible values at this point.
I'm higher on Montez, but I do like them both. I'm higher on Montez.
I just like the idea of a guy like Josh Sweat later in drafts. He's a guy who's been historically caught in rotations there in Philadelphia. Now finally gets to break free from that, get a full-time role in Arizona with virtually no competition for snaps. I haven't looked at snap counts and how they typically deploy defensive linemen, but you've got to figure with the depth they have in this room that Josh Sweat is going to get plenty of run, and he's a guy who, honestly, let's just see what kind of upside. In Philadelphia, in a rotational role, the guy was able to amass 11 sacks in a season. So we're looking at a good upside for a guy who's been stuck in a rotation and can typically pop if he's given the opportunity. He doesn't quite have the kind of tackle floor that we want to see, as he's never really approached anything more than 48 or 50 tackles in a season, but definitely a guy who, with a new kind of look, a new environment, just a fresh start, I think he's a guy who has the upside to really definitely return on the ADP, because the guy's freaking left the waivers in many of the drafts. I'm picking him up in the last few rounds, and I feel like for a guy who's just going to be on the field a lot, I think I've got a good floor for a guy to kind of make up some depth at the defensive line position. Then Montez, I don't know, just kind of some coaching regime changes. I think maybe the team's going to have, again, just kind of something about new regime, like old regimes getting out, new regimes getting in, and just having that motivation to kind of play and show out for your new coach and your new team and a new look, and just going to show them that you're all in. I feel like Montez Sweat's in a great position, especially with the additions they made to the defensive line to kind of help him not really be the focal point, not necessarily that he is that the additions are going to completely take away, but definitely add some help. So just a couple of guys I like to eye later in the drafts. If I feel like linebackers are going early, I'll go ahead and get some linebackers and wait on my defensive linemen. I just feel like this is a great year to pick up middle to late round defensive linemen who have high upside. Kobe Turner was another guy who you took Byron Young. Kobe Turner's kind of almost the same kind of guy, going to get eight sacks or so and about 80-90 tackles, a high floor interior defensive lineman. Another guy that I kind of like I'm more of a high floor than a high ceiling guy. A lot of people go out and chase high ceiling. I know in our mock draft for the offense, combined mock draft, I really kind of shot for the ceiling. That's a little out of character. I figured if I was going to lean into it, I might as well dive in at that point. So I did, and I had fun with it. It was kind of a good turnout, but typically I like to have high floor players. So if I can get guys like Kobe Turner, just some sheer tackling guys, Justin Simmons, like you had mentioned, I don't mind getting that for depth. It's just a nice guy you can feel comfortable about putting in when you get guys that are missing for bye weeks or whatever the case may be. So what's your thoughts? If you have your way with things, do you like to attack linebackers early, defensive linemen? Do you totally punt defensive backs, or do you go in and grab one here and there? What's your preference? Do you like getting those top tier edge rushers, or do you prefer maybe a higher end linebacker?
I think there's a certain, ceiling or tier, you could say Crosby, Hutchinson, Garrett, Bosa, those guys, sure. I think they're in contention to be a top, 5-6 pick in any order. But at the same time, the way these drafts have gone, man, at least on these sleeper drafts, I think I'm just going linebacker heavy at this point. I think the value of just, especially bankability, when we talk about bankability, guys like Jermaine Pratt, Devin White in that unit, who knows what's going on? Who knows what's going on in Arizona? So the fact that you have consistency in those snaps, guys like Nick Bolton, not the highest floor player, but he's going to get the snaps. Zach Bond, same thing. Fred Warner, like these guys aren't setting the tone. Maybe Zach Bond was last year, but Fred Warner didn't have to lead the league in tackles to be drafted at 6 overall and be a good pick here. So something about stability plays a lot of, it gets a lot of brownie points with me. And to me, that's why I'm drafting linebackers early. The fact that Foye was my first linebacker, my first pick, that linebacker, I'm not really even that excited about. I do expect him to bounce back, but at the same time, who's to say he does? Who's to say he stays healthy, gets the snaps he's used to? I think it's more than likely 75%, but still, has a little bit of risk to him. Edge Cooper, like I said before, who knows if it's all going to click? It looked good last year. We'll see where it is this year. Maybe Quay Walker, comes with fire under his eyes. We never know. Singleton, maybe he doesn't play for the first week or two. So there's holes to my team, and I think it's important to get the linebackers early. Zach Vaughn's a guy who I love. I think the confusion with Jihad Campbell and Nakobe Dean is a great look for him as the LB1 there. Great, no risk to him. Hayden Ellis, I don't think there's much risk to his game. Ernest Jones, Jordan Brooks, these are top guys, and I think it's important to get them. I mean, you saw Derek Brown didn't even get drafted. Malcolm Kuntz didn't even get drafted. Keon White so slept on the rankings, but I think he is somebody who should be, trying to get that later defensive line position. You said Kobe Turner too, Byron Young. These are all great players. Jonathan Cooper, focus on the tackles. Don't get enamored with the sacks. Now, Derek Brown, there's a risk of no sacks in his game. So not everything's perfect. You want to have a healthy balance, like a Kobe Turner, like a Byron Young. But we can get these guys much later. And, it depends on where you're at with your defensive backs. I mean, Winfield went here in the third round. I think that was a great pick. I don't think I'd really take Nick Cross or Hamilton, maybe Branch over Winfield, but Winfield's my number one right now. And I think that's great value for him. Maybe if I'm getting him in the late third, I'll take him. But other than that, when you got guys, who are still solid that, didn't get picked, Jaden Hicks, I think is a solid bet this year, maybe close to 100 tackles. Damani Richardson for those deeper leagues. But again, Kevin Byard, fine guy. Jordan Battle, fine, love him. So there's definitely value that wasn't even taken here, off the board, defensive back. If you can give me, say, let's look in the 8th round, Grant Delpit and Tyler Nubin as my, 2 defensive backs, that's all you need. Tyler Nubin, I think, just by chance I said his name is a good look. He's to me, a top 5 defensive back this year. But these guys prove stability. You can't really ask much more. Go win it in linebackers. Go win it in defensive linemen. You're probably not going to win it unless you have Nick Cross and Buda Baker from 2024 on your team. So to me, again, going into the linebacker heavy, you even see, if this draft ended and I had to go into week 1, I'd have to make some moves. I didn't even take a second defensive back, but that's okay. Much easier to find a DB2 in the beginning of the season and in the heat of the season than it is to find a linebacker right off the jump. So I'd rather be in that spot. I can always, play around with that. But same with my defensive lineman. Keon White's going to be a guy I'm picking up. Kobe Turner, Derek Brown, guys I'm picking up. So like where I ended here, I'm definitely, just like I do in offense, I take best player, and I make trades, I make moves from there. So I think I did a great job of taking best player, Axe. What do you think about your team?
Yeah, no, I agree. And you were talking a little bit about Foyer. He's the guy who I think, could have very well, a year ago was going up there with Zaire and Roquan in round earlier, so you got him in round 2. And frankly, I think the arrow's only pointing up for the Jaguars after getting Doug Peterson out of there, just kind of getting a whole new coaching regime from what I could tell. And from what I read last season, the whole defense kind of gave up. And they didn't want to play for Doug Peterson last year. And Foyer kind of went down with a little dinky injury midway through. And I don't know if it was an injury discount or what. Yes, he looked a little off comparatively. I think it was just, again, the fact kind of leading back to coaching personnel issues and deployment changes that they just didn't jive well with. And I think that's a perfect explanation for the kind of dip in production we saw. The storyline kind of makes sense if you give up, but you have to be out there on the field. You're not really going to put up the top end numbers kind of thing. It might seem kind of silly to look at it that way, but in my opinion, you get I keep talking about this new environment, new coaching changes, new styles. People want to show up for new things. You get a new car, you want to drive it all the time kind of thing. So in my opinion, I think it's a fresh start for the Jaguars. I like Foyer, especially in that second round. Then again, I'm kind of the same way. I like to, if I can, in the first couple of rounds, I try to get someone from that top tier of edge rushers, like you were mentioning earlier, the Max Crosby tier with TJ Watt, Hutchinson, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, guys like that who are that kind of group of defensive linemen. If I can come away with one of those guys, I feel pretty comfortable about having a lock at the defensive line position. Then I go in the middle rounds. You'll see I've been really fond of collecting my linebackers within at least a couple of staple ones within the first 5 rounds. That's, in my opinion, if you're going to hit your linebackers and you want some sort of anchor within the first 5 rounds, you want to be getting a couple of guys and then fill out your depth maybe later on, because it looks to me here after about the 5th round, maybe 6th if you want to extend it that far. Let's say a pretty hard line at the 5th, you kind of start to see a difference in the caliber of the kind of linebackers that we're looking at here, where Singleton, a guy who could get 140 plus, Jack Campbell has done the same thing, Logan Wilson was on pace for 160, and then the next round, we've got Quincy Williams, who took a massive step down because Jamie Sherwood popped onto the scene. Then you've got Aziz Al-Shair, who took a partial season last year, and he was kind of underwhelming when he was playing. Frankie Louvu is the pass rushing guy, not really a high-end floor player for tackles. He's kind of more boom bust. Quay Walker, kind of much of the same. So that's just the difference in the kind of player. You feel a lot better about the guys in round 5, your Singleton, Campbell, Wilson, than you do Quincy Williams, Louvu, Quay Walker kind of type. So in my opinion, if you're going to get a couple of staples at the linebacker position within those first 5 rounds of your IDP drafts, is kind of where you want to hone in on these guys. There's a lot of good value there. Like we were saying, you picked up Singleton in the 5th, Edge Cooper in the 4th. He's a guy who's going in the 2nd round in some drafts that I've seen. And I was able to get guys like Terrell Bernard, who's finished as a top 12 linebacker. Logan Wilson was on pace to, as I mentioned before, set career highs in tackles and all kinds of stats. So there's definitely some good value in the middle rounds for some linebackers. But I definitely like to get those top tier edge rushers, come back, get my linebackers. And then, like I said, with the middle of the field and defensive linemen being so hefty last year, the board, if you go back and look at drafts from last year, they were the top heavy with defensive linemen. Linebacker, it was almost the reverse of what it is this year. We've got a lot of linebackers coming out now, whereas last year was defensive linemen. Now some of those middling defensive linemen have fallen down the boards, and I'm liking the value that I'm kind of seeing. We're leaving a lot of these guys for dead while we go for linebackers. So I'm going to swoop back up and get those defensive linemen in the middle rounds, the guys who have some proven upside, but maybe took a little bit of a dip last year in production, and we're fading him in draft. So we'll take advantage of it there. So that's just kind of my general approach to IDP drafts in general. If you guys want to see more mock drafting, we do have 2 pretty long episodes where Johnny and I get in with Rich in the studio and talk about a 24 round offense plus IDP redraft mock. We go through the gamut of when do you take IDP, and maybe we can touch on that here. Maybe that's a good thing we can talk about before we round it out here, Johnny, and I'll let you add some context too. But generally, Johnny and I advocate for don't be the one that pulls the trigger on the first IDP. Let your league set the tone. When you start to see the first handful of guys go off the board, then you dip into the IDP wells, but fill out that offensive roster first. What do you say, Johnny?
Yeah, definitely. A point I've been trying to hammer in our viewers and listeners' heads is, be the guy who, almost like a zero running back strategy, zero IDP. Go in with Tyke Smith. Go in with Jaden Hicks. These unknowns. There's 2 reasons, especially the shallower the league. Maybe if you're in a deeper league, you got to reach a little bit more for that. But at the same time, my viewpoint is, first off, your league. If you're in a bunch of leagues with sharks out there, then you probably aren't going to get away with the strategy. But if you're playing with casual fans, they're not going to be doing the research that you're following here for. They're not going to be watching this video. They're going to be missing out. They're going to be looking at offense, which is great. So get all the offensive players. They're going to be wanting to make trades in offense. They're not going to value IDP players. At the same token, if everybody else has rich IDP, I have Zach Vaughn, I have Patrick Queen as my LB1, LB2. That team's thinking, I'm not looking linebacker on waivers. I'm not looking linebacker any position IDP. If they think they're set, they're not looking at waivers or free agent pickups. So be early on those free agent pickups. You don't have to spend a waiver, unless there's like a Zach Vaughn type of player that comes out after week 2, week 3, and there's solid data to that point. Go ahead and use a waiver, but at the same time, I'm not using a number 1 waiver. I'm trying to pick these guys up free agents at 3 in the morning when waivers clear. So go in with zero IDP or low budgeted, and then give us a follow, and we're here to help you. And that's how you're going to get over the most value on your league managers, your league mates. So to me, fade the IDP. If you're rocking with us, you'll get the information. We'll give you some sleepers who hit. Jack Sanborn is a guy who you better be walking away with.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we just kind of reiterate, there with IDP, think about it this way: if you wait and pick them up and pick up guys later, and you kind of keep a pulse on the waiver wire, keeping a pulse on the waiver wire is very important with IDP, because when you have players go down, it's a lot more likely that the replacements come in and pick up much of that same kind of production, regardless of who it is. Opportunity is king. I'm not saying every Joe Schmo that comes in as a linebacker 2 and replaces an injured LB1 is going to come in and pop with 150 tackles. But more often than not, especially compared to the offensive counterparts, these replacements, just when given the opportunity, that's really all they need, is to be right in front of the play. If you're a middle linebacker and LB Logan Wilson goes down, Demetrius Knight's going to slide right over in the middle of the field, and all the runs are going to come to Demetrius Knight instead of Logan Wilson. It doesn't take a genius. It just takes a 6'2", 230-pound guy to take down your running back in the middle of the field. So on IDP and on offense, you have wide receiver 4 coming in to replace Jamar Chase. He's not going to put up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. But if you have a guy like Jack Sanborn coming in for an injured... Who was he playing behind? TJ Edwards. Yeah, somebody. Jack Sanborn comes in and lights the world on fire. He's a guy that everybody's just salivating at the mouth to wait till he gets an opportunity to play full-time snaps. And he was a backup just a couple of years ago. Zach Bond, another prime example, a guy who just got an opportunity and seized it. That happens all the time in IDP. So don't feel bad if you miss out on some of the top-end guys in IDP. There's tons of guys here in this draft that came straight from the wire to IDP notoriety. We're talking about guys like TJ Edwards didn't pop onto the scene until year 4 in Philadelphia. Zach Bond, Caden Ellis is straight from the waiver wire. Andrew Van Ginkel made a living off the waiver wire. That's just a small handful. Yeah, exactly. Dan Henley didn't even hardly play his first year. He had 140 tackles last season. And that's just a handful of guys in the first few rounds. So, they're scattered all throughout. Every year, guys pop up off the waiver wire. Things happen and guys pop onto the scene. So don't feel bad if you miss out on the top end and things don't go perfectly. Follow guys like Johnny and I. We can help you pick up guys on the waiver wire throughout the season. Help be that heartbeat for the waiver wire in your IDP league. So, Johnny, I think we've helped the people plenty. If you guys found some value with this, leave a comment, like, subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss any future videos, because we're about to gear up and go full speed for the season. So we're ready to light that one on fire. So, Johnny, do you have any parting words before we get out of here?
If you're in deeper leagues, you want a question, ask about somebody, this person or this person, fire away. We're checking the comments. We'll get back to your comment. We appreciate you. So thank you again to all our viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of the IDP Plus podcast. Thank you, as always, everybody, for watching and tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.